All right, so I'd like to offer some wisdom, share from experience about the some of the myths on the healing path, on the spiritual path that can be very, let's say, harmful, potentially harmful. Um, Ways that I have done it wrong, and you don't need to do it wrong. Um, just ran up the stairs, so give me a second here. And it's in a sense, yeah, trying to figure my way into this conversation. I recorded one version of this and then I felt a little bit too, like I over shared, like it was a little bit too vulnerable to put out there. But there was a lot of good stuff in there that I want to try to express. And hopefully a little bit more succinctly. But we'll see. I guess just to sort of put it up front, well, one way of kind of walking into it. I heard, a long time ago, I heard this video, this recording, this discussion from Adyashanti, and it was just kind of, I think, like a little bit of a throwaway comment or a comment in passing. It wasn't like a topic of a video. I can't really remember, but it really resonated as just kind of a practical, down-to-earth teaching. What is going on with this sleeve? There we go. And he said, that there's this tendency for some of us on the path to think that everything, you surrender to God. It's sort of like you let go of the wheel. Say, God, you take the wheel. And for some of us, we come to that point just through being checkmated by life. It's like, yeah, I can speak from personal experience, but I don't really need to, because it seems like such a kind of universal thing. There's that AA, Alcoholics Anonymous expression of your life has become unmanageable. And yeah, you can get to this point where it's like all my strategies, all my worldly seeking, attainment, acquisition, not only is not, it's not just that I'm not finding fulfillment in that process, but it also may just be that it sort of self-destructs, or there's just too many contradictions in living, in pursuing fulfillment externally. And yeah, and so things can just fall apart. The catastrophe of our lives lived from a certain altitude. It's like when we're living from a certain altitude of consciousness, that dimension, our inner state, tends to be reflected and manifested in the external state. So if there's a lot of just unresolved stuff and inner pain, inner turmoil, inner grief, inner contradictions, inner division, that's not sustainable. And so you can hit a wall, your life can fall apart. But yeah, and that's kind of the checkmate. That's falling into surrender, saying, well, I gave it my best shot. I earnestly, or maybe not earnestly, but just given my conditions, inner conditioning, external conditions, this is the life I led, and it led to pain. And so that's kind of an initial surrender, a recognition that things are not working. That I'm suffering. So there can be a little bit of an openness, sometimes a big opening towards a different way of moving through life. Roughly speaking, that's the spiritual path. And yeah, and so, but there can happen, this gets back to the Adyashanti quote, you can start to find in that surrender a grace, a healing. You can start to sense the trajectory of the healing path, that it's more about a surrender, it's more about an undoing, it's more about a softening, a relaxing, an allowance, that the system wants to, it's like a river the river knows the way to the ocean, but if it's blocked up with boulders and impediments and barriers, etc., you've got all these kind of inner blockages. It's more about getting out of the way and allowing God's light, that inner grace, to move through you. And so you open, you surrender, you stop. And the unwinding process, you could say on one level, and really kind of the deepest level, you could say it unfolds through you. Yeah, that natural intelligence starts to unwind and liberate. It's like a self-cleaning mechanism. But in that context, you can see how this can happen very naturally and very innocently, with the highest, most noble of intentions and kind of inner orientation, that that surrender is going to resolve everything. I'm trying to think how Adyashanti, and so he talks about, you can get to this place, this orientation, this inner kind of way of approaching life, where you say, I'm just gonna fully commit to this surrender. It's better than anything I've been able to produce. I'm just fully in. God, I'm completely in. I am yours. Guide me, lead me. More of you, less of me. Amplify yourself within me. Magnify what's good within me. And I'm just going to completely commit to that process of surrender and stepping back. There's kind of a necessary, almost entering into the cave, stepping back from the world. I'm going to let all of this stuff unwind, and I'm going to work through and let all this process happen. Let the course run, let the river return to the ocean. And then I'm going to step back into reality, back into the world. I mean, this is kind of stepping into the deeper reality, but then I'm going to re-engage with life, right? And if you have the resources, it can mean stepping away from work. Excuse me, I've got something going on with my eye here. I don't know if he was this specific when he mentioned it. I think it, like I said, it was kind of a throwaway comment, but yeah, I don't know if it was something he was dealing with. Like, I think he worked at a bike shop, that he was, going to step back and just really marinate and let all this stuff unwind and steep in God's presence, and then just let that natural intelligence kind of move take care of all the specifics. And so for him, I don't know if that meant, and then, stepping back. Anyways, it doesn't really matter what it meant for him, but you can very easily encounter that mindset or that notion, and there's so many kind of cultural examples or examples in spirituality of like a Ramana Maharishi, Eckhart Tolle. And it does, and so it does happen, but it's important not to get too idealistic about it. Because you have to make money, you have to be practical, you have to keep the lights on, and I'm the last person to really be giving this message, in the sense that I have not, in part because it's been such a difficult healing path for me on a number of levels I don't really need to get into, but on another part, it's just the depth of my surrender and the sincerity of just, I am giving everything over to you, come hell or high water. I'm done. Hands are off the wheel. And that's beautiful. There's something very pure and noble about that. But we don't live in India, and even India, I imagine, is changing, but India's got this kind of cultural context of sadhus and people that are just fully on the spiritual path, and that's an honored and culturally normative to some degree, maybe more so in the past, but probably still today, that there is a cultural space for that, you could almost say occupation, in a sense, that you've got these mendicant monks who wander around barefoot, often just with the very minimal, just one robe and offering, their blessing, offering their spiritual practice as their gift to reality, as their gift to life, as their surrender to God is their gift. And that you have, householders, you've got, just all these kind of traditional life roles, these traditional social roles, and that these sadhus, these holy men, who are essentially homeless, but that there's this kind of cultural support and this cultural backdrop that recognizes and provides food and shelter, etc. Now, I don't want to overly romanticize that, but just as a point of contrast, homelessness can mean something very different depending on the context. And so there can be this kind of notion of, I'm just waiting for God to unfold kind of miraculously the circumstances of my life and place me in the role of, holy man or spiritual teacher, or just even, it doesn't have to be that. I mean, healing can go infinite variety of directions. but you have to keep, it's not going to facilitate your journey to be homeless and to be, there's just so many hardships that come along with not having adequate provision for your body. And so that it just sort of necessitates making money. And for some people, this won't be an issue at all, but life will sort of force your hand at some point that you have to re-engage with the world, I guess is a simple way to put it. Yeah, and this may be a complete non-issue, but I'm just sort of speaking, what's relevant for me, and again, for all kinds of very good reasons, pure reasons, understandable reasons, I can see within myself ways that I've leaned too far out, too far into surrender. Sort of waiting for the wave of God to take over, to carry it forward. Yeah, and you can get into some very difficult predicaments that way. And another aspect, it's because the other side of this is if you've lived your whole life just doing, the weight of the world is on your shoulders. You've got to make everything happen. It's up to you to control the circumstances of your life, and just that kind of hard driving, hard pounding, success, achievement oriented, which is in many ways kind of normative, social. It's sort of the social default in modern society, in the US at least. And you see how much damage that does, and how much that narrows your being, how you relate to yourself, how you relate to the world. You see, that's kind of the other extreme of it. But if you wait to be perfectly healed, here's a simpler way to say it. If you wait to be perfectly healed, that day you'll wait forever. At one point in the path, I really wanted to, I just was so kind of overwhelmed with my nervous system and so many other things that were happening that I really just said, because again, it's a very understandable way of looking at things, because it's like, once you've committed to healing and you've seen the path open up and you've seen this kind of multidimensionality opening up, coming online, it just kind of makes sense at a certain level. It's like, well, let me just give everything to this now, short term. And I've had teachers even tell me this. Let me give everything to this now, short term, doesn't matter. I'm committed. That other way of living, being in the world is the road to death, is the road to hell. And so I'm just going to give everything over to God. And you can almost think of it too, kind of practically. It's like, it's not really a practical consideration, but you can kind of frame it practically and say, let me do all the heavy lifting now. Let me go deep now. and then things will kind of take care of themselves in the future. It's like, let me do this in a deep, concentrated way now, a couple rough months or years or whatever, so that the rest do the hard work up front, so that the rest is smooth sailing. It's something like that. I'm not expressing it exactly. And there is a wisdom to that, and there is an incubation period, of course, that is helpful if you can manage it. It's like protecting your little flame of healing, of awareness, of awakening, of peace, of authenticity, of God breaking through into the formless breaking into form. It's like you've got this little flame and you want to protect it from the winds of the world until it grows into a conflagration, until it becomes an all-consuming fire, till you become consumed in the fire. But part of what you surrender to ultimately is relativity. It's like practicality of making money. And yeah, it's a fraught terrain, because who you were, speaking from experience here, who I was, who I've been, is not who I am. Again, it's like you live your life, you come into this world with all of its madness, and you pick up all these just conditioned patterns of relating to the world, and it's like you're living in this very tight suit, ill-fitting suit. It's a little bit of a Ram Dass influence, I'm noticing, until you're just suffocating, right? It's just the way, everything, you're dying, you're suffocating. And so once you kind of, and that's a certain altitude. It's like you're living on this certain bandwidth of reality, of creation. When that falls away through force or through, maybe a more gentle process, or just through grace, however you want to look at it, and you shed that suit, or you're taking off that suit, and you realize, man, I do not want that. That is the road to hell. It's like you're moving into a wider field. You're moving into a vaster consciousness. You're moving into a greater wholeness, sense of your being. And it's almost like all that stuff that came before is scorched earth, right? It's like it's dead to you. And so there's this limbo of like, so how do I now move in the world? All these strategies that I see clearly have caused ruination, have caused my immiseration, have spread pain out into the world, have, just all this crap. And you're healing from that, and you're releasing that, and you're dissolving that re-engagement process. If you've stepped away from for a while, that re-engagement process can be very difficult, because we're not really in a cultural context that is friendly to, or is even often aware of the healing journey, the healing process. Could even say is antagonistic to, seems to be in some level engineered or designed to be antagonistic to coming into the fullness of your being, coming into a healed state, moving through the world with integrity as the light, as the truth of creation, as peace, as, moving through life with that kind of integrity and power and peace, goodness. puts you in this predicament. Because you don't want to, you also don't want to just it's like you want to respect your peace, what you've recognized, the depths of who you are. You want to honor that and recognize that, and you value that. It's like your whole value system changes and simplifies, clarifies to some level. And so you can get into this kind of grandiose, it doesn't necessarily come from a grandiose place, but it can kind of, practically speaking, you can look at it and say, well, it's just, yeah, I guess it is a bit grandiose, that this notion of being, I'm just going to I'm going to be a lighthouse in the world. I'm going to radiate peace, God's grace, goodness, light, life, love into creation. And that's not bad, but I guess it's grandiose in the sense that you have to recognize what this world is. Yes, there are awakened beings, awakened contexts, but a lot of creation, just to kind of speak bluntly about it, a lot of the world around us, the people around us, we're all, as Rick Archer says, we're all bozos on this bus. None of us is a perfected being, but and we're all on our own path. But you could say there are environments that are more conducive and less conducive to your own evolution. It's like, is this and I guess the grandiosity that I was trying to express is thinking that I can just shine the light in every context and I'm going to transform every context. And that's a little bit unrealistic. Ultimately, yes, the deeper layers of creation do transform the more superficial, but you're up against scale, the magnitude of the confusion and chaos is such that it makes sense to be selective about where you spend your time, how you spend your time. And so that is sort of where this is kind of another side tangent, but I'm thinking about morality. Because as I've gone on the path, I feel more and more resonance in a strange kind of way, in a particular kind of way, from a certain approach, from a certain angle, more and more resonance with a kind of traditional morality, in the sense of, just a lot of this sort of, like, well, I don't know if I want to put it in this context exactly, but yeah, I guess sort of the modesty and the moderation and the some of the more traditional, like, moral virtues that you hear expressed in different, if it's Christianity or in Buddhism, or just, broader morality, broader ethics, wherever it's rooted. But you come at it, you come into, like, for instance, not using substances, not using drugs, not using alcohol, not getting lost in your sexual proclivities and sexual indulgence. You don't come at it from it's not primarily from a moral angle. It's like the more healed you are, the more inwardly intact you are, let's say, the less necessity for these external gratifications or these external strategies for healing. Your life becomes simpler, and so those the kind of allure of the world, the tantalizing nature, titillating nature of the apparent external world starts to just lose its appeal, starts to fall away, starts to become irrelevant, you could say. And so it's almost like the moral prescriptions are more like spiritual descriptions of how it is that you want to be in a harmony, living in harmony with life. Anyways, that's sort of a whole different thing, and just kind of a sidetrack, and I don't think I fully fleshed that out or explained it, but I'm not sure where I was going exactly. Yeah, I guess just it's there's the reality of keeping the lights on, and you would want to be, in a sense, kind of in a Ramana, a Bhagwan Sri Ramana situation where you've got people tending to your body while you're in samadhi and bringing you food. And I mean, that's a pretty radical transformation, right? And the path is radical. It seeks to transform every dimension of your life, but that can be very dangerous. And I don't always hear teachers kind of emphasize the practicality of engaging with the world. And it's just because it starts to get so fraught with okay, I think this is where I was going with all that. It's like you want to be selective about who you have in your life, what habits. This is where I got off track. It wasn't even off track, just anyways. This is where, choices around diet, around your digital media diet, around who you have in your life, and work is one of those very significant dimensions of one's experience, one's life, just because of the amount of time of your waking life that we tend to spend most of your productive hours can be spent. And if you're not making a lot of money, if you're making like a minimum wage or a low wage, then even more hours. And so the environment that you're in, you have to start to be selective on one level. Again, you can't just be grandiose Guruji saying, I'm just going to radiate. I don't care what the context is. Put me in, I don't know what would be the best example. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but put me in a strip club or a dive bar or a fast food restaurant, maybe. I don't know. You don't want to denigrate any level of work, really. But there are environments that are more or less conscious, you could say, just to kind of put it really bluntly. For a variety of reasons. It's just like people are at different stages of the game, different stages of life, different stages of development. yeah, I don't know. I probably shouldn't have even tried to specify because it's just going to be different for everybody. But finding the right environment for your evolution. Feeling a little bit low blood sugar. Yeah, and I can say this is all relevant for me. It's like I don't want to often struggle with how much to personalize or self-disclose versus like extract into the more universal general principles. But yeah, I mean, I've been really struggling with that, with all this stuff that I'm kind of sketching out here, figuring out how to re-engage. Yeah, and I've realized for me, it's not so much about the particulars of a given job. I've applied to work in hotels just to be like a hotel room cleaner. Is there a male equivalent of the word maid? Yeah, I don't want to think of myself as a maid, but yeah, doing just, that kind of a job. I've applied, in one case, applied to this job to be basically a poop scooper at a dog kennel. And so it's not really about that. I think any level, I'll just say this because I feel a little bit bad for throwing these different occupations under the bus, but because it's not really how I feel. I think any level of work has dignity. It doesn't really matter what the particulars are, if you're scrubbing toilets or whatever it is. But I don't know if I just want to say it this bluntly. It's sort of like the people that you're with, and you can kind of, the more you heal, the more sensitive you are to the energy of a given place. And, you have to be practical, and you don't want to be overly precious because obviously, the circumstances of our life, that's where the rubber meets the road. And part of the path is about figuring out how to be yourself in the world. And you can use all of that as grist for the mill. But you can also just be realistic and say, the way that this place is managed, or the kind of ambient level of consciousness of a given workplace, maybe the hostility. You want to find a growing edge is another way to put it. It's like when I've been going around thinking about I'm doing DoorDash delivery right now. Uber Eats a little bit, DoorDash mostly. And yeah, so I'm going into all these different, mostly like fast food restaurants, service, some a little bit higher, upper scale restaurants, but mostly like fast food restaurants. And again, it sounds bad to say it. It's not really a judgment on anybody, but some of those environments just are so kind of frenetic, chaotic. Maybe a great saint could find total peace in any context, but really sure where I'm going with any of this. I've kind of talked myself out right now. Did not end up being very succinct. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is just that you can be overly idealistic on the path, and that to your detriment. And I haven't figured it out. In some level, I'm sharing to flesh it out myself. Some level, I'm sharing mostly just what I'm doing wrong, what I'm getting wrong, what I've gotten wrong on the path. And I don't feel too much guilt really about it because I see how it happened. I see how I got here, and it wasn't malicious or bad. It was for good reasons. I'm also not saying this is applicable for everyone, obviously. I think it's just maybe a certain personality type, maybe. You can be so dedicated to one thing that you kind of lose touch with, or you become overly idealistic about, the practical things. And but it's also very tough and kind of rich terrain for suffering and hopefully for growth, evolution, figuring out how to make a living in an aligned way. Not a perfect way. See, that's the shadow of all of this, is that perfection. Wanting to be perfectly healed before you re-engage. Wanting to find the perfectly aligned situation. And life will disabuse you of that, or you will suffer. This side of heaven, it just ain't possible. Yeah, and so that's been a struggle for me personally, trying to figure all this out. It's like all the training and education and years of effort. It's just kind of irrelevant, to say it very bluntly. Not completely, because you do pick up certain skills that are kind of transferable across jobs, but so take heart, be well, be strong. Pray, ask God for help. You do still, it is all still surrender. Having said all of that, out of the other side of my mouth, it is still all a path of surrender. And you're human. It's like part of me hesitates to share too much about my own situation, in part because I don't want to narrativize it too much, create a story, part because it's vulnerable, and it's like you're just kind of casting these videos out into the internet. Part because it's hard to share what you haven't really worked through yourself. You kind of want to be protective on one level. Yeah, I mean, for all kinds of reasons. But you also, you want to share your humanity too. And keep that intact on the path, with all the difficulties. surrendering into the pain of what you're experiencing, the difficulty, being willing to cry, being willing to, it's not about being vulnerable really to anybody, even though that can be skillful and helpful and healing. It's really about being vulnerable to your own process and your own humanity and your own limitations. Saying, this is hard, this sucks. Yeah, yelling at God sometimes, often. What the hell is going on here? You've got somebody who's so willing and so wants to, yeah. Yeah, because sometimes the retreat from life is it's not about running from difficulty. It's not about running from the world. It's about running directly into the difficulty, into the deeper layers. About so, anyways.